Hey guys, it's Ollie from Rad Season. Welcome to another episode of the Rad Season Show. I'm super excited to be joined today by multi-kayaking event winner, first drop pioneer, three-time world freestyle kayak champion, Dane Jackson.
Thanks for having me, dude. Stoked to be here.
Dane.
Thanks for the strong intro. I think you embellished it a little bit.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was going to go more, but how are you, man? How's everything going?
Everything fantastic. Currently out here in the Big Island, Hawaii, just chilling and having a great time.
Nice. And what have you been up to there? Have you been getting in the kayak every day? And
pretty much every day. It's got some of the best kayaking on the other side of the island. It's got, when it rains, there's some of the world's best kayaking over there, and one of my favorite places to come. Been coming here for a few years, and it's been a pretty all-time few weeks, and just got a few more days, and I'm just gonna be kind of chilling. Got to let the body recover a little.
Yeah. So I mean, what's the drill over there? Are you guys kind of are you sort of checking different spots every day, or you kind of get up and?
There's a few spots that are there's quite a few rivers, a lot of drainages on the other side of the island. A lot of them are a little bit smaller and a little bit most of the waterfalls aren't as clean, but there's one section of river called the Wailuku that runs through the town of Hilo. That's got some of the world's best kayaking, world class, some of the most perfect waterfalls. Especially when there's any rain, there can be waterfalls from perfect 10-footers all the way up to perfect 100-footers. Just depends on what you're in the mood for or what you're good enough for. And it's honestly like some of the best kayaking in the world.
Nice, man. And who have you been traveling with? Is there a few of you over there?
Yeah, we've got a few friends that have traveled with me out here. The crew always kind of changes up when I come out here, but I had a few friends that joined me, and we've had a really incredible few weeks, and now unfortunately it's come to an end, but it's been really good.
Nice, man. Good stuff. Well, I guess I'd love to take it back to the beginning. You've got a pretty interesting upbringing, and for all the people that are listening that don't know your story, it'd be great to sort of if you could give us a bit of an overview of where you grew up and how you got into kayaking to begin with.
Basically, when I was born, my dad was already a professional kayaker. He went to the '92 Olympic for slalom. He did lots of whitewater. He'd been kayaking for a long time. And so by the time I came around, I had an older sister. And we both, even though we weren't necessarily kayaking, immediately he would bring us to the rivers. He would put us on his lap. And then when I was about 4 years old, we moved full time into an RV. When my dad basically moved away from slalom, it's committed full time to doing more whitewater. When we basically just sold the house in Maryland, moved into an RV full time, and we went wherever my dad wanted to go to kayak, compete. And so we were immediately just surrounded by kayaking. And from there, immediately I was just I was either in the river stealing people's kayaks, playing with little kayaks around the river or down little creeks, or if there was the opportunity, my dad would still take us kayaking. So immediately I was surrounded by the sport. And then we actually lived full time without a house for 6 years in the RV. So there was plenty of time to be around the river during that whole time. And even after that, we moved to Tennessee, but we still spent most of the year in an RV. So kayaking has been the full surrounding of my life growing up. And my dad wasted no time to get myself and my sister into it.
And how did you find that growing up? I mean, that was probably just normal for you and your sister, right? It was kind of.
Yeah, it was definitely fairly, it's a different lifestyle for sure, but it became kind of just normal life for us. And even now we're adults and doing kind of our own things, and we still work together, paddle together, and still have a pretty similar lifestyle. But growing up, it was great because, I love kayaking. I love being around the river. I also got to spend every day with my sister. It's not like we were going to school and then coming back. We were homeschooled. So we got to spend every day together growing up. It's really fun having the whole family together. And then just gave a great opportunity to see some really cool places and kayak whenever I got the chance.
Awesome, man. And were you just sort of going around the US, or were you going into Canada as well? And
you pretty much in the RV we go to US and Canada every year. The Ottawa River in Eastern Canada is one of the most world-class rivers. It's bigger water, but when it's low in the summer, it's really warm. It's actually one of the best places in the world to learn how to kayak, whether you're a kid, adult. There's a couple programs out there, including a program called the Keener program, that you can really learn a lot of incredible kayaking out there. It's deep and warm, so it's safer. And for me growing up, that was a perfect river for me to get the opportunity to paddle, because it's just a great spot that I could still be in my own boat and run these sections. because it's just a really safe and easy spot to teach someone. So that was my favorite river growing up. And so we went there every year, spent a lot of time in Colorado, all over the US. And then we also were flying international quite a bit as well, because we would go to, Africa, New Zealand, wherever the time was to go. Like whether it's the World Championships, 99 that my dad was competing, wherever it was, we were going all together as a family.
Awesome, man. And how old were you when you started competing? Were you like were you doing juniors? Obviously, you would start off with the junior events and.
Yeah, so I basically I started kayaking when I was like 2, like in my own boat, like doing whatever rivers my dad could do. But for about 6 years, I never learned how to roll. I think we weren't really. My sister and I just didn't necessarily want to. But then one day, I guess my sister was just like, "No, it's time to learn how to roll. Like so that way we can start running more whitewater." So I learned how to roll when I was about 8. My sister was 11, and that's right when things really started to like, okay, we can not only was I able to progress a lot faster and start paddling more often. My dad could start taking me on harder rivers, and as well as start competing, because I obviously knew how to roll. So yeah, right about 8 is when I learned, and that's pretty much right when I started competing.
That's awesome, man. And were you going to? Was it in the same locations? And like when would there be like the seniors pro division, and then when you're doing the events?
Depends on the events. Some events they have like junior divisions, like up to 18, and then the adult division like 18 and up. But there were certain events like the Teva Mountain Games in Vail, Colorado, that wouldn't have a junior division. That even if I was 9 or 10, I'd still have to compete with the rest of the older guys. And a few times I've done well there, even when I was younger. But when I was like 8 or 9, there were also some cadet divisions that you could compete in. At a few events, there'd be enough little kids in the area that they do a kind of a kids event, sometimes in a smaller feature that started there. But just depend on where you were and what the event was.
Nice. And your dad say he was doing this full time as a profession, right?
Yeah, he's kayaking's been he had a lot of different things back in the day, but once kayaking was kind of his full thing, it's never stopped. Whether it's being a professional slalom paddler to the point that he was professional like Freestyle World Champion, extreme racer, all of that. But he also has been a kayak designer since '93, with multiple different brands, including our family company Jackson Kayak. So he's been full-time kayaker for pretty much ever now.
Yeah. And Jackson Kayaks is when that started off, wasn't the idea that he wanted to build some smaller kayaks for you guys, right? For you and your sister, so he could take you guys out on those.
Yeah, exactly. The cool thing about Jackson Kayak is that was right around the time when I did have this like prototype kids kayak beforehand that helped me progress a lot. My dad really wanted to make kids kayaks, but everyone was always telling him that there wasn't a market for it. They're like, no one wants to buy kids kayaks. And he's like, no, I'm pretty sure that they do, because kids up until that point, like there were kind of some other boats, maybe smaller slalom style kayaks, but there were no like proper good like kids kayaks that really like allow kids to paddle similar design to the adult. And so he couldn't convince the brand to the brand that he was with to make kids kayak. So when he left, the first thing that he did was like, all right, we're going to make kids kayak for myself and my sister. And that was the first boats we made. Now these kayaks are like, they're real small. I was like 9 years old, 10 years old at the time. So these weren't big kayaks by any means. And I was a small kid. But that was the first thing he did. And he sold a bunch in the first season. And that allowed Jackson Kayak to have a great start. And then he continued to make adult kayaks. And he not only made kids kayak, but then he made kayak for the biggest paddlers as well. So it's just a long spectrum of sizes. But it's cool that because he started with kids kayak and it did really well, and then now there isn't a brand that doesn't have a kids kayak. It just took an interesting flip for sure.
Nice. And it was around sort of like 2010, 2011. Was that when you were looking at sort of, you were basically winning all the junior events? You were thinking, okay, like, am I going to start competing and take it up a notch and go in the main senior events, right?
Well, I mean, that was also the years 2011 when I turned 18, and therefore I was graduated out of the junior division. Once you turn 18, you turn 18 is the last year you can compete. That was also around a similar time that I'd had results, like I've done well in pro competitions before that as well. But it's just more that once you get that age, you have to compete in the pros. But I mean, even before then, I still was having, success in the pro. I mean, like when I was 13, I got 3rd place in a freestyle competition at the Teva Mountain Games in Vail. And, I had some good results, but that was right around the time that not only did I turn 18, but it was also right when I started to have even better results. I finally I was really small for a long time, so I finally started to fit in my boats a little better then. I had this like weird in-between phase because I was not a big kid, but that was right when I started to finally fit in the boat properly again. So I started competing better, racing better. I just won the Freestyle Grand Prix, which is like a big invitational event that was in Canada, racing freestyle head-to-head. And I was only 17. I won that. There was all of it kind of happened at one time where it was just a really strong progression every year. And that's when I kind of moved into just being able to compete with everyone and have good results as well.
Nice. And was there any sort of moment back then when you were like you were doing a lot of traveling, when you were sort of looking at, okay, like more of the freestyle side of things outside of competition, or were you like, okay, I want to combine it, and as long as I'm in a kayak and I'm in the water, then that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah, no, it wasn't like ever a question of, because the cool thing is that especially with the opportunity to travel so much, the whole year incorporated a whole bunch of different kinds of kayaking, whether it's freestyle competitions usually happen from like May to June. And so I always loved training and being ready to compete for those few months. And then some years every other year, it's the Freestyle World Championships, wherever in the world that was. So I always wanted to make the team and compete there. And I've been going every year since I was 13. As well as, there's obviously races and things like that. Or in the summertime, there's not as many competitions, but it's a great opportunity to maybe go overseas or a lot of places. So it was all about just what the season was and what I was in the mood for. But I love just doing all the aspects instead of just picking one.
Nice. And from the sponsorship point of view, would like what did they want? Was it sort of like they were like sort of looking at results, or was it more kind of like the media side of things and getting good footage? And
it just kind of depends on the kind of the niche you fill or where you feel strongest. It depends on, it kind of depends on what they're looking for, what kind of brand it is, but also just how you present yourself and what you are coming to the table with. Some sponsors, obviously, they kayaking is a fairly small sport, so for bigger brands, some smaller events might not, show up on their radar necessarily. But within kayaking, if you're doing really well in competitions, it's really great to be able to be like, hey, look, I'm doing really well in these competitions. Here's my result. I'm going to be training and trying to win the world championships or get this highest score, or I'm going to do all these events next year. And then you can also say like, oh, I'll do, edits from them, or I'll do social content or whatever it is. You can do it all. So from sponsors, it's just kind of, some people don't do any competitions and they just do exploring and they just do, first descent or one project a year or something like that. So from a sponsor perspective, it's just about what you bring to the table, which is kind of nice because everyone can kind of find their own strength and kind of utilize that rather than like you have to be a competitor to get this sponsor or this brand.
Yeah. And speaking of first descents, when did that start for you? Was that sort of something that you did early on, or?
It was the extreme kayaking and the more like bigger waterfalls and exploration and first descent and mainly waterfalls definitely started a little later. I did a lot of steeper kayaking growing up as a kid, and as I started to get better, I wanted to do a lot more. For a long time, I was more known for freestyle, and I did it a lot more because took up much larger portion of the season. And I still compete all the time, but I would say right around, I did a lot of like steeper kayaking, but right around I was like 16, 17 is when I really started to like see if I could go on more trips. I went my first expedition with my dad and a bunch of people when I was like 14 to Newfoundland. And we got to do some first descents there, but like really starting to like try to fill up more of the year with potentially exploring or running first descent. I was probably more like 17, but even then I over the years, like I've probably done more of the first descents I've had in the last like 4 or 5 years, or maybe even less than that. Sometimes you don't find the things, or you're not feeling up to it or feeling good for something you see. But the longer time has gone on, the more I've pursued and looked into exploration and first descent. But I really started to enjoy the waterfalls and things like that a lot more when I was 17. I did it a lot before. When I was 17, I was like, okay, I really like this stuff.
Nice. And it's obviously like if people look at this from the outside, they're like, this guy's dropping off 100-foot waterfall. He must be nuts.
On inner tube. Idiot on inner tube.
There's this guy in a pink kayak going over this massive waterfall. What is going on?
Yeah, pretty much.
But it's years and years that has gone into this, right? Ever since you were super little, and the practice and the dedication. When like when you first started to, like, with everything that goes into this, is there a massive crew involved when you do these expeditions and you go away, like with that first one when you went with your dad? Obviously, you know, there's like, there must be like sort of different sort of safety protocol and everything involved. And
Oh yeah, no, 100%. I mean, a lot of times, you know, if you're a kayaker, it's easy to understand when you see a situation, you see a photo or a big first descent, you're like, okay, I think I see a bad spot there. There's probably safety there. It's much easier to like take in. But if you're an outsider or someone that's never really seen this kind of thing before, it's really easy. The way I kind of always see it is that for outsiders, they see the stunt in the movie, but they just assume there wasn't any lead up to that point in the movie. You know, I'm like, there is so much that goes into the actual moment that people see, which is important because, you know, like not only to that act, even if it's 100-foot first descent, wherever it is, there's a lot that went into that moment of actually getting to run it. One, we've like scouted it a bunch. Usually, a lot of times you get to see it without water. That means you can usually kind of get better scouting. You can maybe see it, swim below and see if it's deep enough. Look at a lot of different things. Look where safety is. Look at caves, whatever it is. Do all of that scouting, and then past that, once it becomes the day itself, you usually have multiple people ready to help out. You know, you have people with throw bags, rope on the sides of the river ready to help you, and wherever the dangers are. Especially with big waterfalls, we like to have people in their kayaks after the drop because they can kind of maneuver around the pool and paddle to wherever you pop out if you're hurt. So there's a huge crew and a huge involvement and a lot of preparation that goes into just those few seconds of free fall because you want to be as safe as possible, like prepare for the worst and like, but be ready for it. And so that there's a lot that goes into that like moment of 100-footers. But beyond that, it doesn't seem like it because people have never seen it, but there's a ton of technique and skill that goes into that moment. Like no one just goes and runs a 100-footer after they've only run a 5-footer. I know a lot of people always are like, if someone sees you doing that, they're going to do it. I'm like, no, it's like complaining about the big air ramp and wondering like, oh, clearly someone just tried that. It's like, no, they just kept doing bigger jumps. So that's how it is for us with waterfalls. Is we started, you know, I started running waterfalls when I was like 10 years old or 8 years old or 9 years old, whatever I was. And over the years, not only have I run more waterfalls, but I worked my way up on waterfalls. So I would, you know, 10, 20-footers, 30-footers, 40-footers, 50-footers. Like sometimes it wasn't a perfect increase, but there was a lot of techniques you learned while building up on bigger waterfalls. By the time you get to the 100-footers, you probably have a good idea of how to control, how to do everything you can at the lip of the waterfall. So for those that don't know, the goal is to land as vertical as possible in a waterfall and hopefully even swallowed by the flow a little bit. But if the more vertical you land, obviously with enough flow, and if you get tucked up, it should be a relatively soft hit. It can feel like nothing. Sometimes it can be a bigger hit, but that's the ultimate goal. But there's a lot of technique and things that need to happen, especially on big waterfalls, to set that angle well. And every waterfall is different. So it's all about just developing these techniques as you're working your way through taller and taller waterfalls. And by the time you get to a 100-footer, you probably have a lot of confidence in your skill. And I know I do. But obviously, there's still risk in waterfalls. They're big, they are dangerous, but that's why we have all the safety. So there's a lot. By the time you're someone that's running a 100-footer, you probably have run a lot of other waterfalls working your way up. Like no one ever goes from a 10-footer to a 100-footer. And if they do, we are not involved with that. We don't know what, like, I don't know who has ever done that and why they ever would, because it, you know, you have to work your way up.
And are there different techniques when they get bigger? So when it goes from like 10 foot, 20, 50, like as the drop gets bigger, obviously the severity, you know, it gets more serious. So is there sort of like different techniques to kind of what you should be doing?
Not necessarily different. I mean, kind of in a way. Now the weird thing about waterfalls, and they're one of the most fun and incredible things to do. And like I love doing waterfalls, but they are in the end one of the more dangerous aspects of kayaking because there's a lot of variables. Like some people have gotten more hurt on 20-footers than on 100-footers in a way. Like it just, waterfalls just have a lot of things, a lot of variables, whether it's even if a smaller waterfall sometimes hurts more than a bigger drop, or some people get lucky, some people don't. On even a perfect line, sometimes people, you know, hurt their shoulders a little bit like that. But when it comes to technique, the goal is to land vertical. The worst case, the thing you're always trying to avoid on big waterfalls is the front of your kayak coming up and doing what's called a poof, where if the bow of the kayak stays up, that's a lot of surface area. So if you land, that's called landing flat off a waterfall. That pretty much the best opportunity to get hurt, because that's how you can break your back or something like that, because you just have so much surface area. So you're just not going underwater at all. You're just landing dead flat. That's basically the worst case scenario, especially with really big waterfalls. But that you can actually do pretty much up to like 30, 40 footers. Some people have gotten lucky and not gotten hurt on bigger drops, making that mistake. But on those smaller drops, if you land flat, it's not as big of a deal, especially if you land with your bow down a little bit, out and away, if you have some good technique. But as you go up in the bigger drops, some people have their own style, but the technique stays pretty similar. You're going to be doing a pretty similar thing, but it kind of comes down to more the waterfall itself than it is the technique. I definitely a bit different.
Wow. And there's so you did a pretty interesting descent last year over in Chile, which got a lot of attention. I've actually got a clip of it, if you don't mind, if I show that, and then I'd love to talk about it afterwards.
Go for it.
Oh.
Sounds good. I think I know which one you're talking about.
So that was the notorious Malay drop, which is it's around like 134 foot, right?
Yeah. Cool job.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard you were like eyeing up this for like, it was like a couple of years, right? That you saw photos of this place and you were like, you thought it would be possible. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that's Salto Malay in the Malay region of Chile. It's just one of those, like sometimes, one of our favorite things is just kind of, just if we're bored or we're just like, we're looking for something new, we'll just Google waterfalls in certain areas. But with that drop, I was actually finishing up my first trip in Hawaii, and my friend from Chile showed me a photo of that drop. And I was like, where is that? Because that was like 5 years ago. I was like, where is that drop? Looks amazing. And ever since then, I kept coming across photos of it. But I would also, every now and then I'd go back and just look at a photo, because it's just one of the most like photogenic, like mind-blowing, like visual waterfalls, because it's like looks like it's on the surface of the moon, and there's like this big like mountain behind it. Most waterfalls have like really big pools after, which would ultimately be a goal, because if there's a really big pool after a waterfall, it usually means that waterfall it should be deep enough. It's a better sign that it's deep. Whereas that one's like this little cauldron. So, and there's a lot of little boulders everywhere. So visually looking at it, it was like, it does look potentially like it's not deep enough to run. And people had been telling me that, because a few kayakers had actually been there in person, and they were like, yeah, it's just not deep enough. I'm like, I don't know. There's a pretty big boil. It looks pretty promising to me. But I kind of just sat on it for a few years. I was like, maybe I'll check it out one day next time I'm in Chile. And I also had a very big misunderstanding on how hard it was to get to. Maybe they built a road in the 5 years, but someone definitely told me it's like a few hour hike, or like a super, super far. I hang glided in or something. And I realized that the road literally drives up right next to it. So that was clearly a misunderstanding on my part. But either way, the thing was that I was actually in Hawaii here last year, and I was finishing up the trip here, just had a bunch of good first descents. And my friend messaged me, and he sent me a drone video of like, just one of the better like video clips we've seen of it, like more high quality, bunch of really good drone shots of a dude actually slacklining above it. And we were both like, oh, okay, this actually looks really, really good. At least worth finally getting a visual of, regardless what the effort was. So I booked my ticket, and it was literally from that day, it was a month later when we actually ended up doing it. So we like scrambled for this project, like last minute. It was like, okay, we want to make this happen. So I went home, I stayed home for about a day, and then I flew to Chile, went straight up, scouted it. And for unfortunate reason, I did get to see it without water. But it's actually dam controlled right upstream. So the water was actually off when I got there, which was perfect because I got to get a good visual of the base, which meant that because it's a lot of flow when it's on, but when it's off, it was like a trickle. So I could actually get a good look at how deep the pool is and where the rocks might be. And it was super mind blowing to see, because again, when you look at photos, there's like the boil is like 15 feet tall, 10 feet tall, just exploding. And I couldn't figure out why that was happening. But what's crazy is that all the flow has just been hitting the same spot so perfectly, a consistent flow, that it's like a cauldron straight down. So it's shallow all on the side, but it was like, it had to have been at least like 40 feet deep in the middle.
Kidding.
And I was like, okay, well, that's a good sign. It still had a pretty narrow landing, but I, after staring at it for like a day and then looking at a lot of photos and then getting to see it with the water on, I had a feeling that I was feeling confident that if you're in the middle, that you were going to be landing in deep enough water, especially because the trickle of flow was landing like right on the rock. When the water was on, it was a massive spout of water. So I knew they had to have been clearing at least that distance I needed to make it to the deep water. And then, we got to scout it for about a day and a half, got to put together a big project with a friend of mine, Corey Rich, who I've grown up knowing, a major photographer, and he managed to just like pull together this super epic last minute project with like a huge amount of people. And yeah, once the day finally came to run it, it was one of the most like glorious views ever, because it was just like, what's funny is that that's at the top of like this like super high up. It's like almost like the surface of the moon. But after that drop, it's actually another like 150 footer around the corner. So when you're coming into that waterfall, it really looks like you're about to fall off the face of the earth, because just looking down, like a lot of gradient. And the cool thing is that I didn't actually, I mean, everyone at Red Bull and certain like marketing people, it became a nightmare for them, because I actually didn't measure the waterfall until after I ran it. And the reason for that is, one, height is important to know, but in the end, the first like 20 feet of the waterfall is what's going to determine the rest of the waterfall. You only have that split second or half a second at the lip of the waterfall to set your angle, and you can play with it a little, but if you go over the lip of the waterfall and the front of your kayak starts coming up, there's not a whole lot you can do to save it at that point. So whether it's a 50 footer or 130 footer, that top of the drop is really the main time you have to set your angle and do it right. So I didn't end up measuring it, because looking at it, I was like, it looks like a great height. I'd already done dropped around the size before, so I felt really good about it. And the visual was like, I couldn't figure out if it was 80 feet or 200 feet. Like I had a feeling it was right around 100 feet, but it was so hard to tell, because just the visual of it, it just made it look so much smaller and harder to get a gauge on the side. But I ended up not measuring it till after I ran it, which I'm pretty happy about, because I felt really confident in the size, the line, everything, and I had the basically the best line I could have hoped for. Unfortunately, though, when I landed, I don't know why I didn't think about it, but it's a pretty powerful river, and the skirt on our kayak that keeps the water out, those can sometimes come off on waterfalls, and I should have really been thinking about it, but I just didn't. But that's a very powerful drop, and unfortunately, when I landed, my skirt came off. I did come out of the waterfall in my kayak, but because my boat was full of water and those boiled, I pretty much had to get out of my boat and get out on the rocks. I didn't get to paddle away, so it wasn't like 100% successful the way I wanted it. But the line itself was about as good as I could have hoped. Landed nice and vertical. I expected like a train wreck of a hit. It was super soft. But after everything was said and done, my friend and I measured it, and the way we measure it, we actually put two. There are certain techniques, but the best one is just putting our two throw bags that we have for safety together, because we know the length of those. We have put two of them together. I stood at the lip and I lowered it down, and my friend was below with the radio and just telling me how much farther to the water, that kind of thing. And we actually maxed out our two throw bags when measuring it. And I thought these were 50 or 60 foot throw bags. So I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. Somewhere between 120, because we maxed them both out. But then when we went back and did some researching, the ropes we had used were actually 70-foot ropes. And so we maxed out both of those to get it to the water. And we were like, okay, this is tall. And then we actually ended, so it maxed out at 140, but the ropes were swinging a little bit and it was kind of touching the water. So we took away a few feet to make up for those variables. But when I realized it was actually the second tallest drop that had been done, I was like, hey, by the way, guys, like it's actually pretty big. And they were just like, why couldn't you tell us that before? I'm like, sorry, I didn't know. But I'm really glad I waited till after, because I had done, I think, 500 footers up until that point. Some good lines, some not so good, but I had experienced bigger waterfalls and a lot of drops just under 100. But I'm glad I waited till after, because I think I was just so confident in the visual and just how it looked that I felt really good about the line. If I had measured it and it was 134, I probably still would have had a good line, but I think I would have been thinking about the height more rather than my actual confidence in the line itself. Like, I think, so I'm glad I waited till after, but I think a lot of people weren't. They were like, why couldn't you tell us this before? But no, it was really incredible. It was a really fun waterfall, and I'm super fired up. I got to experience it. And unfortunately, I'll be the only one.
Yeah, well, so can you, have they closed it off then, or like what's happened now?
Nothing on because I ran it, but because basically it's just below a dam, but they've been working on a diversion channel for it for like, I think like 2 years or something, maybe 3 years,
okay.
Where they're diverting it around the mountain on the other side. I forget where it was going. but it was I ran in February. It was supposed to actually go dry in March. But I saw photos the other day, and I'm thinking it went dry about 6 months ago. They finally finished the diversion channel, so it's actually completely dry there now. I don't know if it ever like rains to where the lake fills up and that's like an overflow channel now. I don't know, but right now, like I saw, you look at photos, it's actually almost completely dry. And I had like friends that show me photos, and it's weird because the pool's like emptied like almost all the way. It's really wild to see, but I hope it comes back in. Maybe there'll be another person that's fired up on doing it. Maybe can have a even better can actually stay in their boat completely and paddle away. But unfortunately, right now it's completely dry.
And like when you were doing it, I mean, what, like just before you drop in, what are you thinking about? Are you just thinking about that because is it the first second you're thinking, all right, that's kind of the only thing that you can control, right? Is that first second when you do drop in? Is that what you're focused on, or is it all like, you know, you've kind of been through it in your head 100 times and
I mean, you definitely
visualize.
Yeah. I mean, we've definitely visualized a lot of kayaking because, you know, all we're doing, we're scouting it from the side, you know, we're scouting the lines and we're trying to get an idea of how the water is going to behave. And, you know, water is such a unpredictable thing. You never know. But the best thing you can do is just visualize beforehand. And a lot of times it doesn't go exactly like you visualize, but the more you can kind of just get a sense of what you think it's going to feel like, you kind of feel more confident going into it. So, you know, I visualized it the whole day before, looked at so many photos, you know, looked at my phone, you know, imagine the lip, just imagine how it's going to feel going into it. And then the whole day, even pretty much up until the last second when I'm peeling out, I'm having at least one last like visualize on how I think it's going to feel and what I'm aiming to do. But what's funny is that a lot of times, because water changes so much, but I usually visualize, but then as soon as you actually pass the point of like no return, like right before the waterfall, things actually go, at least for me, pretty like tranquil, and things get, cause you know, like, you'd be really nervous and like excited, but nervous when you still have essentially the opportunity to not do it. But as soon as you're committed, that's when things definitely get much more like relaxed, and you don't have a choice. Now you're in the flow, you're about to go off the drop. And a lot of times, you know, I try to have somewhat of a plan, like, oh, you know what, I'm going to come in, you know, like the middle of the river, like on that drop, but like I'm going to come in the middle, make sure I'm staying where the water is going to be deepest, maybe have my bow just pointed a little bit to the side so I can kind of do the technique the way I want to do it. And then I ended up doing things slightly different than I planned, but it ended up allowing me to have the best line possible. And that happens to me a lot on bigger waterfalls because I feel like I visualize how I want it to go, but a lot of times it comes down to me just reacting, which I think helps a lot because you never know what the drop is going to do. Like if maybe you like made a step-by-step that you absolutely have to do it this way, you might panic when the river's like, you know, we're going to go a little bit over here, a little bit here, or we're going to put a wave in your face as you go off the lip. So there's a lot of visualizing beforehand. And for me, it's just on top of that, it's just staying fired up and staying stoked the whole time leading up to it, and then once it kind of goes blank, it's just kind of, you just got to do what you got to do. And it's a really fun moment where it like just clicked and it's like, all right, here we go.
And what do you think will be next? I mean, now that, you know, if you can't go back to that one, have you been looking at any other spots, or, you know, any other places, either like sort of like pioneering another, like looking at other rapids or looking at waterfalls?
I haven't necessarily. I mean, I have a few waterfalls. Like it's basically the thing for me is I'm constantly like just moving around, going with water's best, but I also try to, you know, look long term and try to find out where the next best places to go. I haven't necessarily. There's like, you know, a couple waterfalls that I've been like, okay, I would love to go see that and see it with water. I'm definitely not the kind of person that I'm definitely not necessarily looking for like the world record or anything like that. Because I think the world record would be really cool, and there's definitely some waterfalls out there that have the potential for it. But I don't know if that's going to be me. I can't say it won't be me because I won't like. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? If I see something so perfect like a Salto Malay, I'm like, I can't. Like it just looks so good, and I feel really confident about it. But for the main part, I definitely, you know, obviously this last like year and a half, 2 years, has been a little harder. But moving forward, I definitely want to focus on a lot of exploration and trying to go new places and first ascents. Whether it's, you know, Russia or Norway, Iceland, wherever get the opportunity, definitely want to go do a lot of more exploring because, you know, I'll always have, you know, big water. I always have freestyle kayaking and, you know, big wave surfing and all of that. But the thing about waterfalls, you know, like you're not going to want to do them forever necessarily, because, you know, eventually you just get a little tired of being scared. Like, even I love waterfalls so much, but I mean, if I do them for like 6 months straight or a month straight or whatever it is, I start to be like, okay, I want to break and go maybe do something that's not quite as scary. So having, what's nice is that I don't rely on any single aspect of how I paddle, whether it's freestyle competitions, racing, or big waterfalls. I'm able to cycle through them to keep everything fresh. And with something like big waterfalls, having a bit of a break is always nice to go do some other stuff. But I also know that I'm probably not going to want to run big waterfalls forever. I'll always enjoy them, but I might not be doing 100-footers forever. This is that right now. I feel like I'm at the height of like my utmost confidence to run bigger waterfalls, and technique, and just how I feel running it. And I keep improving my skill the more I'm doing them these days. So I definitely want to use that confidence and skill to potentially run things I might not want to do in the future, whether it's wherever I end up going.
Nice, man. And what about competing? Like we continue doing that? You think? I mean, that's kind of that will go past. Like after you're done with waterfalls, you'll still be doing events and.
Oh yeah. No, competing is it's very much at the base of like how I got started. And my dad, like, you know, is like one of the top competitors, and I got to not only compete with him a lot, but compete at a lot of the same locations. And even up to this point, competitions have been a big part of what I do, and I definitely don't plan on stopping anytime soon. Because it's such a great opportunity, but it's also, you know, it's I just really enjoy them. But also it's been a good training, because you know, you're scared when you're doing competitions, like freestyle competitions, but there's not fear of getting hurt, just fear of trying to do well, like just trying to do the best you can. And I feel like growing up competing and continue to compete, just staying fired up and just enjoying being on the water and competing and hanging out with friends and just having a great day on the water, that I think has translated to when I run harder whitewater, because I definitely a lot of people, you know, everyone has their own technique. So, but some people, you know, they kind of shut off and kind of, you know, they want to be in their corner visualizing and don't necessarily want to be talked to. They just want to visualize their line. And if that's what works for them, great. But I think what's great for me is that I stay stoked throughout all aspects of whether it's the first descent, a big waterfall, or competition, like the build up, the talking to people, the like moment beforehand, and then all of that. Because I've stayed fired up, the whole experience is that much better, for better or worse. So if I'm enjoying the whole aspect of the competition, if I end up not winning or doing as good as I could have hoped, I still enjoyed the whole experience. And for me, I think that translated to waterfalls, where, like, you know, I'm staying fired up and super smiling. I'm talking to the safety crew, having a great time for the whole build up to the waterfall or whatever it is, because I was enjoying all of that. If the waterfall goes great, it's that much better of an experience. If it doesn't go as good as planned, I still had a great time. So competition, I think I've made a big part of where I'm at today, but it's also a great way to just keep my skills going well. Racing helps with my downriver, staying smooth on the water, better forward strokes for better power. You know, freestyle, I have way more experience being upside down and surfing features and things like that. So all of it, I find, kind of complements each other, and I definitely don't intend on stopping any of those anytime soon.
Nice. And out of all the events, I mean, you've won, you know, a lot of titles. Are there any kind of events or locations that stick out as something that, you know, you just love doing and you would want to do that, you know, no matter what, every single year? And
right. No, I mean, there's definitely there's a few staple events throughout the year, but there's a few that are just, you know, pretty much unmissable for me. One of them is definitely like the North Fork Championship in Idaho, outside of Banks, Idaho, on the North Fork of the Payette. It's basically just kind of it's an event that James and Reagan Bird from the Northwest, they started putting that together back in like 2011 or something like that, 2012. And it's basically just this, it's roadside, massive steep whitewater, invitation and qualification only, but it's this huge piece of whitewater, Jacob's Ladder. It's like one of the more like super fun sections and really hard, but then they add gates in it, so it becomes that much more complicated. And it's basically just the top kayakers racing on one of the hardest sections with some of the hardest moves. So not only is it extremely difficult, but it's incredible spectator to watch, because it's one of the few places that spectators can actually get to watch some of the hardest kayaking. Because, you know, a lot of time kayaking, the hardest stuff is out in the middle of nowhere. So it's one of the few big like spectator styles we get. But also the vibe there, just the amount of kayakers that are there, the stoke and everything is just so real. So it's what a lot of kayaking events should be. It's just the whole aspect of it is one of the most fun weekends of the year. and it's just one of those unmissable events for me. So when it didn't happen last year, I was really sad, but it looks like it's on par to start this year. But there's a few other events I love too, like the GoPro Mountain Game, the Green Race at the end of the year in North Carolina. It's a little more grassroots, but it's just one of those events that it's just so hard and fun. I just love being there every year.
Nice. And what about like things like how the sport's developing, and there's sort of new aspects into it? I mean, I saw this mad. Well, I actually got a clip of it. If you don't mind me putting it on, but have you surfing, just getting completely barreled in this river wave?
Yeah, go for it.
I'll whack it on. Man, so that looks like you're pretty much out like out in the ocean, but I mean, yeah, it's crazy.
That's rapid number 11 on the Zambezi River below Victoria Falls, on the border of Zambia and Zimbabwe. So basically, Victoria Falls, that's one of the 7 wonders of the world, like one of the most famous places in the world. That section below there is actually one of my favorite places in the world to go kayaking. I went for the first time when I was like 12, and I've started going every year these last few years because it's not only is it big water, really fun big water, there are a few rapids that are more challenging and a little harder, but for the most part, it's actually, for at least at our skill levels, it's fairly like chill. Like it's a lot of fun and just good big water, and an incredible spot to go spend about a month kayaking every day. You're kayaking 4 hours every day. You're hiking into the gorge, hiking back out. Great place to get in shape, avoid the cold winter, and just have some of the best kayaking with your friends. And this winter, normally I go for about 3 weeks, which is a really fun time frame, but that's on a kind of a normal winter when I would be like jumping country to country to country. Last winter, once we decided like, okay, where can we go that we're being a little safer, but also we're definitely not going to be moving around as much. We decided that Zambezi was still a great opportunity to go, but spend a longer period of time. So we actually spent 2 months there. And what's cool is that we started just in the middle of December, and we stayed until middle of February. But what we got to see, which we had always kind of wanted to see, is just the levels continually rise. Because we started there pretty standard, like medium low level. By the time we left, it wasn't like the highest anyone had ever been there or anything like that. But we got to see, like, I think the river must have risen like 10 vertical feet over the time we were there. Like the water level just kept getting higher every day. But a big reason why we wanted to be there during that time frame as well was that wave, because that's on rapid. So the rapid names, instead of names, like the raft guides have names, but basically it was numbered, and that's rapid number 11. And that's actually one of the more famous kayaking waves. I hadn't got to experience it, but basically a long time ago, we started seeing footage of it. You know, Steve Fisher and all these guys, they started surfing it. And basically it's a very big, like kind of vertical, like pour over at low water. But as it got higher, it just kept progressively picking up to the point that it actually makes a perfect, almost ocean barrel, like that video you saw. And that wasn't even like it at its prime. That was just one of the days it started to form.
You're kidding.
And it gets bigger. It's not necessarily taller, but I think like it was fairly
just wider,
the barrel was fairly like coming like pretty angled. Whereas I think as it gets basically more straight over the top. Now the only thing about that that this trip we've literally been like childhood dreams to get to surf that wave, because we had seen so much footage growing up. But the time frame of it, we just never got to travel there during that time, because it's just later in the later in January, February usually, whereas we usually only go in December. So we were like, okay, this is the opportunity to finally get to see it. And as it kept forming, it was incredible, because we were like, oh my gosh, I think today's the day or tomorrow's the day. So it was really incredible. And I did get a few surfs like that, kind of getting the sense of the barrel. The only thing we did learn while we were there that was a little unfortunate, but the more you learn, the better. So when rivers behave a lot differently on the way down versus on the way up, mainly to do with like water pressure and things like that. And as far as we could tell, the time that had been like perfect for that wave, all the projects we had seen, those guys usually there on the river on its way down, which makes sense because when water's on its way down, the big pool below it pushing on the wave harder, so it makes it actually create a better barrel. So we didn't get like the prime day we had always wanted, but we still got to experience like what the clip you saw. So it still like we were like losing our minds the first day we got there. And like the first day I was like, okay, we can actually like get barreled. And we definitely crashed a lot because we still didn't know how to surf it yet. We weren't like the guys that have been surfing it for years. And it'd been a little while since people had been there at those flows. But yeah, it was incredible to see. But I think we definitely want to go back when it's on its way down so we can get that like perfect prime barrel. But it was definitely still a great experience.
That's awesome. And you're doing all your own production as well, right? So I mean, like with that clip there, and you know, like editing everything and doing, like, I mean, there's a lot that goes into these trips. It's not that you guys just rock up at a place.
Yeah.
You know, it's a whole project, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. We sometimes we get the opportunity if we know something like if there's a build up to it, or we know there's a certain moment, like, you know, a Salto Malay or a first ascent like that. There are opportunities, you know, potentially put together something a little bigger, and potentially if we know there's going to be access for, you know, bigger video cameras, maybe professional photographers that aren't kayakers. But for the most part, kayakers, like, and what's actually one thing that's really tough is getting these people to the places that we kayak. We're out in the middle of nowhere most of the time. But what's really incredible about that, and actually one of the nice things, is that that means that we have all learned some aspect to support our kayaking and our production. So for myself and my friends, like, we shoot all our own photos, we shoot our own videos, we make our own edits, we do our own YouTube, and sometimes we'll still pass that footage off, and maybe someone else will put it together and build something. But it's cool because that's was one of the things that came with the sport we chose, is that we had to learn something to get our kayaking out there, support ourselves, our sponsors, and things like that. And it's really fun because, you know, when we go, we're not like waiting for, you know, the camera guy to show up in a lot of the places. It's like, okay, let's get out and get this shot, or like, this is the edit we want to make this time, or blah blah blah. Like it, and I, you know, I fly my own drones and all of that. Like it's fun. That one of the things that's come with it is the ability to do all of this side of the production as well. And sometimes we're fortunate enough to have other people come in and film us and film certain things, but a lot of the time we're doing all of our own stuff.
Nice. And what are you guys going to be doing like when you get back after Hawaii and then later this year? Have you got any projects that you're going to be working on?
There's a few places that we originally had in mind to go this year. Obviously things are still, it's hard to plan ahead, too far ahead at the moment, because things are still a little tricky to know what's going to be allowed and what's not. And we're obviously still trying to be, you know, as safe as possible, while still, you know, want to support local or international locations, like, you know, because, you know, Zambia, like they were just so fired up to have even a little bit of tourism. We were able to support them while we were there. So we're just trying to find a healthy balance of not being irresponsible, but, you know, support certain areas that have been struggling without the tourism. But where we're going to be allowed to go this year, I don't know. Over the summer, I hope to be able to go somewhere like Norway. Maybe we wanted to go to Russia, but it's like, I'm not sure that that's going to be allowed, or if it's still too early or not the right time yet. So it all kind of depends on what becomes, what opens, where we can do safely and do it right. So I'm trying not to plan too far ahead, but for the most part, moving forward from here, I think I mean, it's going to be in my RV and basically going where the water levels seem best. And I think right now this summer is looking more of a US based season, and I'll probably mostly be around California doing the multi-days out there and High Sierra run. But if things start to, you know, smooth out over the summer and there's a potentially opportunity to explore somewhere else, I'll definitely look into it.
Nice one, Dane. Cool, man. And what's the best way for everyone to follow what you're up to?
I mean, I'm on the usual places. I'm posting YouTube videos pretty much every Monday and Friday if I can on my own channel. If you want to see like bigger project edits, we have, you know, if you send on the YouTube, usually where we put our main big edits from our project. And then I'm obviously on Instagram, and yeah, that's my main other spot. If you want to see just like raw, just posted clips, you can go to Instagram. But if you want to see like longer edits of like proper rivers and proper runs, my YouTube, I post a lot there.
Cool, man. Awesome. Well, Dane, it's been really good chatting to you, man. And yeah, we'll definitely be keeping watch what you're up to. And yeah, hope it all goes well.
Appreciate it, dude. Thanks for having me. Thanks for getting us on the show, and look forward to potentially chatting more.
Thanks, man. Cheers.
Have a good one, dude.